Welcome to Unsheltered Conversations, where we explore the people, partnerships, and ideas helping to build a future without homelessness. I'm Scott Larson, CEO of HomeAid America. Today's conversation is going to be a little different. Many of you know today's guest is one of the nation's leading housing economists. Ali Wolf has spent years helping us understand housing markets, affordability, demographics, and the economic forces shaping our communities. But today, we're not going to talk about mortgage rates, housing starts, or the economy. Instead, we're going to be talking about something personal to Ali and hopefully to each of you. Ali recently returned from a trip to Ethiopia, where she experienced a very different perspective on housing, poverty, community, and hope. Her reflections resonated with me because they remind us that behind every statistic are real people, real families, and real stories. So Ali, welcome to Unsheltered Conversations.
Hi, Scott. I'm so happy to be here.
So Ali, what led you to take this trip to Ethiopia and how long were you there?
So I think you know this, Scott. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. And where I was born, it was a very similar group of people. I think everyone looked the same. We all probably had the same religion. It was just a very kind of samey world. And as I got older, I just wanted to see what else was out there. And when you look at where is there some of the most diversity in the world, Africa comes to mind. And so I always just look for things that are different in life. And so I've been to Africa now, I think 9 or 10 times. Ethiopia, very different than all of those other experiences. And I was there for 11 days.
Since you've been to a variety of places within Africa, were there expectations that you had before you arrived about what Ethiopia was going to be?
Yeah, I will say Ethiopia was the country that I was probably the most nervous to visit. And that's because before every trip, I go to the Department of State's website and they list countries from 1 to 4. So 4 is do not travel. 1 is you're totally safe to travel. Ethiopia was listed as a 3. And as you looked at the different things that they listed off, it was like civil unrest, it was robbery, kidnapping. There were all of these things that I was like, am I making the wrong decision to go here? But then they showed a map and it's very much like the border towns of Ethiopia that were at risk. And so I didn't think it was unsafe, but I do remember getting on the plane and just being like, am I making a really bad decision coming here?
So there was a certain degree of trepidation because it was rated as a 3. So when you arrived, was there anything that surprised you immediately that changed that expectation?
Yes. I arrived in Addis Ababa, which is I think it's the capital, but it's the main city that you would land in coming from an international place. Addis is clean. There are traffic lights. People follow the traffic lights. There's no trash. There is no traffic. There's high rises. There's wealth. I was just like, what? Like my first reaction was like laughing at myself of like, what was I so scared of? Like, this is so modern.
And I think that that's a great perspective to share because people will, and we'll talk about other things that you've seen in Ethiopia, but people will have a perception. So I'm glad that you had that change in your perspective. Was there a particular moment when you realized that this experience might affect you differently than you were going to anticipate because it was going to be a different country than you've traveled to at other times in Africa? So
the reason people often ask, like, why did you choose Ethiopia? And my answer is usually just African geography. I've been to the West Coast. I've been to different coasts and I was just trying to find a different part of the country I hadn't been to. But once I discovered or started exploring what you could see in Ethiopia, I discovered a place called Omo Valley. So Omo Valley, you land in the capital, Addis. I spent a night in that modern city, and then you get on a flight and you go down. I think it would take you maybe 8 hours. So like Orange County to San Francisco kind of distance.
Okay.
And the Omo Valley is where there are indigenous tribes. So everything that I described about Addis does not apply to Omo Valley.
It's very, very, very different.
Yes.
Only eight hours away. Correct.
8 hours away, yes. And so I want to make that point really clear is as we talk more about the stories, I'm not talking about someone in the capital city that is living in a high rise. I'm talking about indigenous tribes that live in a ancient way that are keeping traditions with them. So just the Omo Valley completely made me realize like, okay, there's Ethiopia and then there's Ethiopia.
Yeah,
These are very
exactly.
different places.
Yeah, there's the Ethiopia that one thinks of, or what caught my
Yes.
eye on your LinkedIn post. And
Yes.
then there's the modern type Ethiopia.
Yes.
So most of us know you through your professional life in setting housing markets and research and data. And when you look at the housing challenges that you describe and that most of us hear from you, how different is that than viewing it through the lens of the human relationships and rather than spreadsheets and numbers? And we're going to probably get into a little bit of that with what you saw there in Ethiopia. But are you able to, in your own way, in your own mind, differentiate numbers and spreadsheets than with the people part that you're going to be talking
Yes. So I really like this question. I would step back and say, if I could do it all again, I think I would have been an anthropologist.
about?
If I could. And I guess kind of in our industry, we get to be certain subsets of anthropologists because we have to understand people and motives and what drives
Right,
them. But
right.
I think let's just go back to the first part of this conversation that we had where we said there's Addis and then there's Omo. I've had people say to me, oh, people are talking about the K-shaped economy, but there's no K-shaped economy. And I'm like, why would they think there's no K-shaped economy? And in this example, I'm like, they live in Addis. They
They
live
live in
in that
Addis, correct.
they live in their world where everything is nice and all their friends have investments and they have money. When a lot of the world, they don't live as dramatic as the Omo Valley, but they're in that bottom half of the K where I think looking at the data, you could just assume incomes are up, wealth is up, people are doing fine. And then when you step out and you're like, this is not just in Africa, this is in America. There's
It
a lot of
is,
people that are not fine, and you need to
right.
get out of your own circle. Even within the home building industry, we all have relatively good and stable jobs. So we think other people have relatively good and stable jobs, and that's not the case for a lot of Americans.
On a personal level, I had an opportunity to, speaking of Ohio, I had the opportunity to go to the Children's Hospital with one of my daughters many, many years ago. And in the intake, there was a question that they asked me that I was completely shocked by. And again, coming from Southern California, and the question was, do you have a dirt floor in your home? And I'm used to going to Mexico and Tijuana, but I'm thinking I'm in middle America and you're asking me this question, do you have a dirt floor? Well, apparently some of their children that come to them come from Appalachia. And that is a valid question for quality of life and the condition that they're living in. That's a baseline for their health. So you're right. It's in places and pockets in this country that we may not realize, and when it's that glaring, sometimes it's shocking.
That's so amazing because growing up in Ohio, I had friends that lived, connected to the Appalachia, and none of them had experiences like that. So even if you
Yeah,
asked me, like when you said that, I'm like, no, people don't have dirt floors. And it's like,
yeah.
yes, they did. And they were probably only a couple hours from me, and you're just not aware of it.
Well, when we get into looking at your trip to Ethiopia, one of the things that really struck me was your reflections on how personal they became. So, what stories when you went to not the city part, but maybe there was, but what stories have struck you that you're carrying with you today that you want to share about your trip and the people that you met?
And let me start with my guide. He was so good at listening to what I want. I basically told him, I'm here to meet people. I just want to know what is life like in Ethiopia. And he tailored the trip from the minute I landed to do that. And so one day he said, all right, get in the car. We're going to go to visit this tribe. And so the tribe's history is that there were a bunch of people in South Sudan, obviously lots of problems going on there. They were able to cross the border to Ethiopia. While not particularly safe, it was safer than where they were living. And so this tribe had escaped. They found their home. They settled down. Resources are limited. So a different tribe started fighting with their tribe,
Mm.
and they had to move again. And they were displaced and they couldn't find where to live. And a different town basically said, you can live here. We're going to give you like this small pocket of land. This tribe looked different. They tattooed themselves by cutting into their skin. Like you could visibly tell that they were not similar to the tribe that lived where they were inhabiting now. And my guide brought me up to a little girl and was just like, ask her what you want. Just like talk to her. And at the end of my conversation with her, I Googled, can I adopt a child from Ethiopia? And you can't because so many monsters went and adopted them and did bad things with them that you can't help them, at least by taking them out of the country. It was so Like, it makes me emotional thinking about her. She wants to be a doctor. She is queasy. And so I was like, why do you want to be a doctor? And she's like, I just want to help people. But
Yeah.
I'm hearing this through a translator. I showed her pictures of my cats, and then everyone in the village came and they wanted to look at the pictures of the cats. And I asked her what her favorite game was. And she took a stick and drew like some squares on the ground and put a rock on one of the squares, and then just like almost like hopscotch, would jump, kick the rock, try to get to the next one, jump, kick the rock. And like, that's what she does for fun.
Wow. So she definitely changed your perspective of certain things. Were there others that you met that might have changed your perspective, either of that tribe or that village? Just even that aspect of different tattoos. Were there some other people that you met that did that?
I would actually go back to my guide. I spent 11 days with my guide. And I learned a lot about him over time. So he did live in the capital city. He lived with 5 of his family members. He didn't have much money. Tourism in Ethiopia, because it looks so scary, from the Department of State, they don't have steady tourism. He was low on money. And we were walking around a village, and one of his friends' moms came up to him and was like, I'm so hungry. I can't eat. I don't have money. And I knew his financial situation. And I said to him, should I give her money? And he said, no, no, no. But then I saw him peel off from me, and he gave her money.
Oh,
and
wow.
He said,
Okay.
let me take care of you. And it was like, I've not seen someone give the shirt off their back like that in a while, where it was just like, he doesn't have anything to give. He knows I have something to give, at least, in Ethiopia terms. But he just wanted to take care of her.
So did that change your perspective of either poverty there, or do you have a broader definition of poverty from that experience?
I think to answer that, I want to do one last story. So a different day we were driving, and my guide stops, and there's a lady on the side of the road, and she's holding a machete. And I don't know what they're talking about.
She is holding a machete. Okay,
she's holding a machete.
She is holding a machete. Okay, I have a visual now.
He's talking to her. And I'm like, they're being friendly, but their voices are getting loud. And I'm just like, what is going on? And she goes across the street. She calls someone over. A guy comes over. My guide says, can this lady, this guy, and their child come in the car? And I was like, well, she has
Maybe
a machete. And he was like, if she wanted to kill you, like, she'll kill you. She doesn't have to get in the car to do it. And I was like,
right.
Okay, fine. So we get in the car, and I'm like, what is going on, though? He said, I knew you didn't want to go to touristy areas. This family is going to welcome you to their house, and we're going to go drive to their house. And I was like, okay. So
Wow.
We drive, you park on the side of the road, you walk for, let's say, 10 minutes in just like bush, and then their house is there. And then their sheep are there, and then their laundry is hanging. And I think to your question about poverty, when I was thinking about, did this change my perception? They were so proud of their house. Their house, you cannot stand in it. You have to crawl in it. Their house is very, very small. There's 4 people that live. Polygamy is common there. So there was a husband, 3 wives, 2 kids, and a couple goats that lived in a house that, I kid you not, was 100 square feet. Probably not much more than that.
I mean, the room that I'm in right now is a 10 by 10.
Okay,
so
there you go. So now fit all of you.
Yeah,
so,
and the animals.
Animals.
But they invited you in, and extremely proud to invite you there to their home.
The husband was clearly so proud. They sleep in a shack. They sleep in a sack, and they were so proud. And I did give him money. And I remember, I think it was $5 American. And the guy could not handle his luck. He was like, did I just win the lottery?
The lottery. So when you were there, were you able to communicate through your guide, or where was the language barriers, or were you able to easily communicate with this family when you were in their home?
Very easily be able to communicate. My guide spoke with them. They had a daughter. The daughter held my hand while we were walking to go to the house. Like she was just happy. Yeah. I could ask them any question. What do you do for work? How'd you meet your wives? How many kids do you have? One thing I will say I've found that I struggled with is, you think about questions we would ask. What do you do for fun? What did you do last weekend? Where are you going on vacation? You're like, I can't ask
No,
any
can't
of those
ask
questions.
those types of questions.
Yeah.
So how did that change your perception of what they viewed as wealth? In the United States and in the Western world, we have a perception of poverty and we have a perception of wealth.
hmm
What did they see as wealth in their world?
It's such a good question. So so this occurred to me. So I told you this guy had a couple sheep, I think, but also when we had picked them up on the side of the road, there were other animals there. So what I learned is wealth is in the Omo Valley specifically. How many animals do you have? Do you have goats? Do you have sheep? Do you have cows? More often than not, they do not eat those animals right away. So
Yeah.
they'll use them for milk and they'll use them as a savings account. So if you are driving and you see a whole bunch of sheep, they're like, oh, that person's wealthy.
That person's wealthy. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And if they need something, if they want to ride to go to town or I don't know what they would need. If they need something, you sell off a goat and then you get your money and then that's your form of wealth. So the more you have, the better off you are. It serves as a status symbol, serves as food, and then eventually when they age out, serves as, they use the skin for chairs and
Right.
drums
Right.
and
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's a very visual aspect of
Yes.
what is their wealth, and probably it's very important for you know the health of those animals for reproduction and
Yes.
building their assets, building their wealth.
Yep, for sure.
So what's interesting is as HomeAid, we look at the issues related to homelessness, and it's very easy to shift from the person in front of you to them being stats. So we just did our HomeAid stats for the half of the year, and the National Alliance to End Homelessness talks about stats on a nationwide basis and things that are given to HUD. And so your experience with this really brings it down personal to begin to shift away from the statistics and viewing people as our neighbors and as our people that is representing a human story before them. And you probably had some ideas of the numbers of people that live in this valley and because it's your bent. But now you're bringing back very personal stories of the people that you met. This is absolutely beautiful. So you were just describing their home. When you came home here, did you have any thoughts about home? I mean, did it change your thinking about home? Because it's so easy to just get back into into what we know. But did you change some of your perceptions of what home means to you?
Yes. And let me tell you what stood out to me. And I've given you lots of long-winded answers. This is a long-winded answer to answer your question, which is when I got home, I was thinking about the experience. And my first thought was the kids in Omo Valley are so much happier than American kids. And it was this crazy, like, why are they so much happier? I saw kids carrying sticks on their heads, kids that are digging water out of the ground, kids that are carrying heavy jugs, and they're so happy. They don't have devices, they don't have comparison, they're not watching TV, but the parents, I would say, were equally as happy. I was as happy as someone that I met there. And that's what stood out to me. Why are they not less happy than me? They should be. They're hot. They don't have AC. They have mosquitoes. They're doing manual labor. There's no TV. I'm not saying TV necessarily makes you happy, but why are they okay? Why do they seem quite happy? And I think my answer was, and then going back to your question of home, is they have stability. Their stability isn't our stability, but they have stability. And more than us, they have community. And I think it was like, that's their baseline of having a home and feeling settled in your home.
And that's an interesting piece because talking about community, because that translates from them being an individual person to their family, to their community as a whole. And it sounds like their community is cohesive as well, even with the one tribe accepting the other tribe, bringing them in. And here we build communities. I mean, the home building industry builds communities, and a lot of it's designed to create community. But it's the people that have to make the built environment into the community.
Yep.
So did you observe some of the uniquenesses from that perspective about did the built environment create community, or were the people creating community there in this area of Ethiopia?
Love that question. The answer is both. So let's do the built environment first. When we were driving, one day I saw a bunch of people gathered and I was like, are they playing pool? Like billiards? And he was like, yeah, they're playing billiards. And I was like, can we go hang out? And he was like, yeah, let's go. And so in that case, what you should picture is stick, 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 stick. Like the house is a bunch of sticks with a billiard table in it and some like thatches over. And then when I went to one of the tribes, middle of nowhere, it took us 2 hours to drive there. There was a pool table. And so that was part of the community that was built. Usually there was one more structured building, at least in some of the areas, that had a TV and they would watch sports. And so that was another like sense of community that was built around, hey, let's have a gathering place.
Right.
But besides that, two other things I would say. One, I really liked. This is not in the built environment, but we got to one of the villages and there were a whole bunch of people sitting in a circle. And there was something animated going on in the center. And I was like, what is going on? And they said, oh, this lady is accusing that guy of doing something wrong. And the elder is listening to their stories. And everyone else is just here because they didn't have TV, but they had like that sense of community, which sounds it was a bit like adversarial, but it was also like fun because they're like, yeah, get him. So
was there activities like other than the billiards? Were they playing soccer? Were they playing other outdoor games? Because we've just completed the World Cup here, and it's a sense of the world coming, and we see that because it's a sport that is played all over. Did you see activities like that in that community?
Yes, so definitely saw soccer, but not usually with a soccer ball, with something that's put like rubber bands put together or tape.
Put together. Yeah, it was not a typical ball, but it was something in the shape of a ball, or they made their ball.
Yes, so that I would say. Lots of dancing. So that was just also if there was a gathering place, people would be dancing. There would be music that was played. And then what I thought was funny too, there was just a bunch of teenage boys and they were just sitting around, just hanging out like teenage boys do. And one of them had on headphones and I was like, what is he listening to? And they were like, those headphones are broken. He just wants to look cool.
Oh, that's amazing. So did you see that amidst the poverty and amidst the challenges that they have, you saw happiness, little materiality, but did you see hope? Did you see hope in their lives and in their circumstances? Because it's challenging. But what did you see in that regard?
Did I see hope? I think the daughter telling me she wants to be a doctor felt like hope.
Yeah, she was looking to the future. Yes.
Yeah, I think yes. Once people got older, I think there was just an acceptance that this is what life was. I don't think there was a hope that life was going to get better, but I think there was an acceptance. In some villages, we talk about their houses and how their houses are not very big, but I went to one village where I went into someone's new construction house that they had saved their money and now they're building a larger house. And so I guess in a way, there is a hope of a brighter future. It's just not as grand as maybe what we would think of what your next move up house would look like.
Right. From a personal perspective, did you feel, as you got used to the community, feel secure? And did you feel that they were secure? I mean, you talked about the woman with the machete, but was there a sense of security in this community? Because were they looking out for each other? And in turn, were they looking out after you?
Yes. One story that I'll share is I was walking around one village and they brought me to this area. And I was like, what's this area? And they said, this is where if you do something wrong, you're going to get whipped. They're going to hit you on the back. And one of the guys that was walking around with us, he said, oh, and he lifted up his shirt. He said, look, I did something wrong. And I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, I got a bit too drunk and I started being mean to an elder. And so the next day I woke up and they had to,
they had to discipline you. Yes.
They had to discipline you. But I was like, so I asked him, I was like, if you knew you were going to get disciplined, like, why did you do it? And I think his answer was just, got a bit too many drinks and didn't stop myself. But I think that there was to me, to answer your question, like that's the rule of law is like, you do something wrong. If you disrespect someone, if you steal from someone, you're not going to get away with it. And so they had their way of punishing them. I never felt unsafe, like not once while I was there.
So obviously Ethiopia and the United States are very, very different and in certain aspects, but are there lessons that you feel we should be learning from this trip and this community that we should begin to incorporate either personally or try to incorporate into our community?
So my first thought was, we have so much. We have so much. When I bought this house, it was 2,200 square feet, and I was bummed that it wasn't 2,500 square feet or it wasn't 3,000 square feet. And how silly is that? I know I'm not gonna be able to change everyone's mentality that we need smaller homes or we don't need as many things, but 2,200 square feet for me is fine. And I could live in a smaller house, and I'm just spoiled, and we're all spoiled. I don't think we realize how lucky we are, most people. But the other thing I would say is we're also so wasteful. We're so wasteful as a country. I think the Western world is. When I was there was a whole bunch of tires, and the tires got turned into really durable sandals. We think about coffee. We have coffee beans. Well, they don't just drink the coffee beans. If you don't have enough money to buy the coffee beans, you can buy the coffee husks, and that will give you a different kind of level of energy. And I think my thought was, when I was thinking about that, I was like, one, what can we do to be less wasteful as an individual? But then think about all of the stuff that we're wasting our money on if you have the luxury to have some discretionary income. But then we complain that housing's too expensive, but then we keep buying a drink every day for $5. That it just made me try to reevaluate what I'm doing with my own money.
Right. Did you see elements of homelessness in either the villages or even in the capital when you were there?
So my initial thought was I had not seen homelessness, but there were markets that I would walk around and you would see people sleeping on the ground. So I think there probably were, but it just wasn't discussed that the individual didn't have a home.
Right. And there may have been a degree of support systems for them from this community, but not like we have here.
When I was thinking about homelessness here versus there, so obviously HomeAid does so much to help support individuals, but I think a lot of our homeless might have a more isolating experience than some of the homeless in Ethiopia. So going back to the example of my guide, I think that if people didn't have a home, they were still, I don't want to say well taken care of, but they were still partially taken care of by a community.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we've discussed in other contexts here. There's an aspect of what's called relational poverty that leads to homelessness here in the United States. You know, the lack of a safety net or the lack of core relationships. And you're right that a lot of the people that we see, particularly those that are chronic homeless, are suffering from relational poverty. And it sounds like that may not have been there, at least as overtly from what you saw there in Ethiopia.
Yeah, I agree.
So does this change anything of how you're delving into stats, you're delving into the markets and starts and all the things that we need to hear from you, we want to hear from you? Are you viewing your data in any different ways because of this trip? Or is it adding maybe more of a depth of knowledge on how you're interpreting the data and presenting it to us here when we listen to you at one of your economic updates?
I think one of the things that has changed with how I would look at data is we ask questions. Let's just go to the Gen Z and the millennials. We often ask, why did you buy? And oftentimes you'll hear some kind of financial reason, but in the past, I probably would have brushed over what's usually either the number one answer or the number two answer, which is stability. I want somewhere that's my own. I want somewhere that I can, lay down roots. And I think after I went to one village where they were nomads and they had to move based on what was happening with the crops and what was happening with the rain. And they didn't know where they were going to sleep at night. And I just look at the data now and yes, housing's an investment, but it's also an investment in just your safety and your stability within your own life.
And circumstances like those nomads, circumstances might cause someone to change and shift and to move to a different market or even within a community. You're right. There's a parallel to there. That's a great insight. So when you came back, was there something that you were grateful for, either grateful for there or grateful for here?
Running hot water.
Yes.
Having water that any day you could just turn on. We don't think about it. I mentioned this earlier, but there are people that have scoops and they dug in the ground and they scoop out water and then they try to get rid of as much dirt as they can.
Yeah.
And that's their drinking water.
Wow. You're a leader in this community, in our community, and people look to you. I have a role with HomeAid, and all of our peers are in positions of leadership. Did this trip change how you viewed leadership or lessons that we should continue to learn as leaders?
What I would say is I met people. If I was in the situation that most of the people that I met in Ethiopia were in, I don't think I would be very friendly or happy. But everyone I met, despite stress, despite poverty, despite being tired, they were so kind and they were so nice. And they didn't let those other factors influence their relationship with people. And so I'm trying to focus more of putting myself in other people's shoes, knowing that they probably have something going on, and just be kind. Why do we need to be mean?
Yep.
We just don't.
You're right. We don't know what's going on with them, even if they're of means or not, or if they're a position of leadership or not. But we can all be kind. And that truly makes us better professionals, better neighbors, just even better citizens in our community. So Ali, as we look to come to a close in this conversation, and I'm grateful that you're going to provide some photos so people can see all this, but I'm going to pull a Tim Sullivan on you because he does this at his panels. We're going to do some rapid fire questions. Was there an image that you will never forget from your trip to Ethiopia?
I went into a school, and the school had no AC. It had holes in the ceiling. It had graffiti on the walls. And I just thought about what it must be like to learn there.
Yeah, just that I'm visualizing that right now too. And it's not what we have here. Absolutely. Is there a lesson that you're going to carry forever?
They have so much respect for land and for animals. And I want us to try to not take those things for granted.
That's profound. Is there one thing that all of us should experience in something like this?
Just go to Africa somewhere. Go to a level 1. If you don't want to go to a level 3, go to a level 1.
But do not go to a level 4.
Yeah.
Is there one thing that you feel we take for granted here in the United States?
This is a crazy answer. Front doors, side gates, fences, things that just keep you safe and private.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I'm looking out my window and there's a front door and there's a gate. Exactly. And what does home mean for you today?
I think this has been a common theme throughout our discussion, but it's safety and stability. It's, if I think about what gives me the most angst is I feel settled and stable right now. I have a job and I can pay my mortgage. And what would make me feel the least settled or stable is if I lost that job and I couldn't pay for my house and I was wondering where I was going to live or where I was going to sleep. And I don't think we realize how much just having a roof over our head gives us that stability and safety in life.
Yep. And how many things unravel when we don't. And so I'm grateful that you saw that stability there and that the people that you met were kind to you and have affected your life in the way that it is. And I'm grateful that you've been able to share with us today. So Ali, I appreciate you sharing on such a personal level. And I trust that this podcast will resonate with so many people that listen to it and hear from you in a different way. One of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation is because, as we were just talking, homelessness and housing insecurity aren't just economic issues. It's a human issue. The data is important, and the markets matter and policies matter. But ultimately, as you were talking, it comes down to how we treat people and kindness and respect. And your experience really reminds us that compassion does grow through just proximity. We need to see it. We need to experience it. We need to maybe go outside of our comfort zone, whether or not we go to Africa and Ethiopia, or we go down to part of our community that we may not have been to before, or even saying hi in the coffee shop or on public transportation. So I appreciate that we've had this opportunity to talk today. And one of these greatest lessons that often come from us is as I was just talking, we leave our comfort zones and we simply begin to experience humanity. So at HomeAid, we talk about how building new lives is so important. And it begins by remembering that every person that we interact with, whether or not it's our neighbor, someone down the street, or someone in Ethiopia, deserves dignity and opportunity and a place to call home. So Ali, thank you for coming today and being part of this conversation. And I truly appreciate you joining us on Unsheltered Conversations.
Thanks, Scott. And really, at the end of the day, people are people.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, everybody. This is Scott Larson, and we'll see you next time.